This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
And welcome to another edition of Ask the Rabbi with Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And welcome to this beautiful Friday morning, another one of those Chamber of Commerce kind of mornings. It is beautiful out there, and we are in the Hebrew month of Adar, getting to the tail end of it, about to start a new moon and apparently a new sun.
As well, yes.
We've got a solar eclipse coming, and thank you, Carol, for the article here about 6 inmates from New York who petitioned, sued actually, right, for the right to look at the eclipse that is going over. And Florida, we won't have a total eclipse.
Just partial.
Just a
right.
partial, and eclipses happen a lot. It's an interesting article. One of those is an atheist. That's whatever.
What I was intrigued by that because I thought their argument was that they were religiously required to see the eclipse as part of their religious practice. And I thought, okay, how many religions actually include observing the eclipse?
I can't think of any, candidly. Certainly, it can be a spiritual event. It can be awe-inspiring to think about how the universe works, right? To understand that what's happening with a solar eclipse is that the moon, which is a fraction of the size of the sun, is going to come and is just the right size to manage to block the sun to us, which that's a pretty interesting piece. And the math is not that difficult to calculate. If you know the circumference of the moon and the circumference of the sun, you can calculate how far apart they are it's a simple triangle, actually. It's not that hard to calculate. So interesting. People have known about eclipses for a long time. It usually freaks the animals out because, of course, they don't listen to WPSL and find out about it. They don't listen to WNBC or Fox News or MSNBC or any of those agencies that would let them know that an eclipse was coming. The other thing that I have found interesting about the eclipse, and this came from a friend of mine who I guess checked, but all along the strip where there's the total eclipse, all of the bread and breakfasts, the B&Bs, the Airbnbs, and those other B&B type, they're all booked out.
Yes.
So people have definitely turned this into a tourist event, and
now they're worrying about cloud cover.
yeah. Well, of course, and I've been there, seen that happen. We had an eclipse not that long ago here in Florida where we were in the either total or almost total section of it. That was just a few years ago. And actually what I remember about it was how dark it got. You don't realize how much the sun gives us. Or even at night, there was a lunar eclipse also not very long ago. And that one really, the difference between a new moon, a dark night, and a full moon night is night and day, if you will. And the ancients would have gotten that really well. And that's probably part of why Jewish holidays all occur right around the time of the full moon. But that makes sense because that would have been a time when it would have been easier to get home from a late meal, etc. So, yeah, makes all kinds of sense that that's when you would throw the big event that would make people linger long past sunset in the time before we have electricity. Yeah. We're so used to it. I'm sure that there are students born today who are absolutely convinced that Moses had an iPhone.
The
or
tablet,
an Android.
yes.
Yeah, the tablets, right. And actually, there's a cartoon. I'm going to be teaching religion at IRSC this summer online. And in my religion lecture, there is a picture of Moses coming down the mountain with 2 of the standard shaped tablets. But I also have a version of that cartoon where he's walking down with 2 iPads. And the tagline underneath it is, "I have a text message from God."
Make it relevant,
Yeah.
yes.
My mentor, Rabbi Zalman Schechter Shalomi, used to say it was the ultimate zip file, and we've been unpacking it ever since. Yeah, isn't that a
Yes,
great way?
yes,
He
I
was
like that.
always, he was amazing at his computer analogies. That, yeah, he was very computer literate and liked to use computer analogies for us. I guess that was part of his way of making it very relevant. Because one of the things he used to say is that the question, are you saved, means are you writing down what you have to give as a gift? And are you hitting save often enough? Are you
Okay.
saved?
Yeah.
Right? As in click that save button. And now we've fortunately got autosave, but that doesn't always work. As anyone who, like me, has ever been there where you've worked for an hour and then the electricity goes bink and you suddenly realize, are you saved, has a real definite meaning. So, yeah, we do live in an electronic age. It'll be interesting to see this generation as they grow up, watch as they look out at the world from their viewpoint, because it's different. The kids born now are post-COVID, so they won't have even experienced a shutdown, but they'll grow up in the aftermath, just as today's college students, the young ones, are post 9/11. For
That was a
them,
startling realization of, yes, the
Yeah.
people who don't
they
remember it.
they
Yes.
they weren't around when it happened, so it's something that's purely in the history books. And those of us who remember life before 9/11 know that it drastically changed in those moments. Even our economy drastically changed.
Sure.
We-
Our attitudes.
Yeah, attitudes and double checking things and identities and some of that. Yeah. It traumatized us as a nation. And we've been dealing with PTSD as a nation. And nations do that too, because nations are made up of people. So when organizations are made up of people who've been traumatized, then the organization's going to show those effects in the decisions that it as an organization makes. Because an organization is simply a collection of human beings. And so we do that. And as we do that, I'm going to go ahead and mention where I am an intern therapist, an intern counselor, and that is at Change of Mind, which is in Port St. Lucie. It's on Bethany Drive, 314 Northwest Bethany Drive. And you can make an appointment with me or any of the other therapists there. And you can go to mychangeofmind.com and go on there, and you can connect to it that way, or you can give a call to the office, and that's 772-284-6030. Again, 772-284-6030 for Change of Mind. And if you'd like to book a session with me, then I'm on the schedule and you can do that.
And what kinds of
Of
issues would you?
If you have anxiety, if you have depression, if you're grieving, if a couple is having trouble communicating, or if a child has issues with the family or the family has with the child, we do all kinds of individual and family mental health counseling. So, yeah, many different things.
And there's so much more attention to that now. It was something people didn't talk about for a long time.
Well, yeah, mental health issues are a challenge because if you break your leg and you've got a bone sticking out, that's pretty obvious that something's not right. But if you're not enjoying life to the fullest, then there might be a mental health issue. And just as you go to the doctor for the pain in your side or your leg or wherever, if you're psychologically or emotionally not having the best life that you think you can, or that then check it out. We are professionals. We are trained. We're not going to fix you per se, because the work has got to come from you. But we'll work with you. We'll bring our tools and our skills to the task of helping you be healthier.
Yeah, tell you how to start.
Yeah,
Sure.
what to do, how to help you figure it out. Help you figure out what the goals are for yourself, because sometimes it helps just to have somebody who knows how to reflect back to you what you're saying so that you can in fact really hear it. And that's part of it. So there's a variety of things that we do. If you do need medication for a mental health concern, then we'll work with your doctor. We don't prescribe medication, but we'll work with your doctors who do. And sometimes you need both. You need both the therapy in the office and medical attention. So we often work with medical doctors too.
So mychangeofmind.com.
Right, mychangeofmind.com. And we're in Port St. Lucie, again, 314 Northwest Bethany Drive. That's right behind Publix. Real easy to get to. You can either get there off of Bethany. You go just past that shopping center, and it's the set of offices. We're in about the middle of the offices. There's a dentist there. There's a spa. There's assorted other offices of that type. And and I see clients in the early evening and also on weekends. So
Oh, good. So you could have outside of work hours. you
Right.
could-
yeah, and I'm not the only one who does outside of work hours. So we work outside the work hours.
And
So
what
that's
age range? I mean, when would you start working with a child?
it
working with-
depends if the child's having trouble, and if the child or the parent is a source of distress. I was just actually, there's an article I just did on behalf of Kaiser University with The Voice, and it was on when should you worry about worrying, right? And so if something that's going on for you mentally is interfering with your ability to enjoy life, then it's time to get some help. And there are many people in the world, and it doesn't mean that you're, something's totally wrong. You're just challenged by something, and it might not be any different from having a back pain or a leg pain or stomach distress. If there's something that you need some assistance to have a better, fuller life, then we're there. And it's just like any other medical treatment. It's working with you to help you have a better life. And that's simple. So if that's something you'd like to explore, you think maybe I'm worrying about worrying too much, or I'm worried about being depressed, or being depressed has stopped me from going out with my friends, then it's time to get some help and find out if in fact it needs some medicine, or if there's just different ways to learn to work with it. And part of it, and I think that the generation coming up is really going to have some challenges simply because we were in lockdown during COVID. And that had some very profound effects. I was talking with some of the college students about how they didn't take online training from school during the shutdown seriously because it didn't feel like school. They were old enough to, quote unquote, have a sense of what school should be like, and this was just fooling around on the computer.
Okay.
And so for 2 to 3 years, they didn't take education
Not
seriously.
seriously. Okay.
And that put some holes in their foundation that
You hear school districts talk now about attendance problems that, because
people have gotten used to not coming.
Yeah.
And we see that in a lot of places, that synagogues and churches have lower attendance. And it's kind of interesting because my congregation has always streamed. We've always streamed our services ever since we started. And when I was at other congregations back then, I actually started, one of my congregants in Tucson turned us on to Blog Talk Radio, of all crazy things.
all right, yeah.
So I don't know if Blog Talk's even vaguely there anymore, but we used to stream the services onto that. And that was thanks to something called Roberta's Network in Ohio with one of the rabbis that I studied with. They had a system where they did a computer-based conference room that you could dial into back in the old days, kind of like you can dial into Zoom, and they would hear the service, and that's why we started with Blog Talk. And then as technology, as tablets and phones became able to stream, we started streaming the video as well. And as you can see, and as people watching Facebook can see the results of, I have a camera that we affectionately refer to as Mr. Mevo. And I don't know why it's male, but it just is. No big reason there. Just, I guess, goes well with Mevo. So,
You can tell how many people are watching a stream.
right.
For religious organizations in general, are they seeing as many people streaming as might have been in church?
They
in
are
synagogue?
seeing a certain, those congregations that have elected to continue streaming are seeing, we see quite a few people. We see more people on streaming than come to the sanctuary, even now. We've always had some, and part of congregations used to say, well, if you have it streaming, then people have no reason to come. I don't think that's true, because when you come, there's a different experience. But I'm glad that we have the streaming. So, for example, one of our members lives in Tucson, and the way that she joins us is through streaming. And the way that we stream, it's not just passive. They can actually send me notes and different, it's texting, it's chatting, but they can be part of the, in fact, one of the big things that we collect are names for the healing prayers and things like that. The people who are watching us live as we're streaming can put in the names of the people for whom they'd like prayers. There's a couple of different places in the service where we do healing prayers, or there's another prayer called the Gomel, which is for people who are traveling or facing a medical procedure. And there's a special prayer that's said for them. And there's I cue people a little bit ahead, so if they want to type in the names, there's time to do that before we get to that prayer. And of course, our regulars know exactly when it's coming, so they know when to punch it in.
You can participate.
Yeah, you can definitely participate. So ours is not just passively live, which I think it certainly adds for me, it makes me feel that those people are part of the service. And the phone is right. I look like this electronic rabbi, right? I'm standing there in front of the congregation, and depending on how the camera is set up, you can actually see the tablet and the phone that are up there, so that I'm watching the streaming myself as it's ongoing.
But they know what you're doing. They know you're doing the service for people who are watching.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The people in the congregation will even sometimes say hi to people they know are streaming. And sometimes members in the congregation are streaming while they're sitting there, but yeah, some people like to watch both, and it's whatever, it's okay.
The electronic age.
Yeah. So it's a fully electronic event. And that's as good a point as any to mention that we are coming up on the Passover Seder. Passover Seder is April 22nd. That's a Monday coming up, and we will do a full ritual Seder, but it will be short. The Hebrew word for that's kitzur. It will be, we will honor all of the different elements. We'll do all of the elements, but it will be fast. So it starts at 6, and we typically eat somewhere between 7-ish. I'll say that's not, when we get to the Passover meal, that's not the first thing that we've eaten, because the initial part of the Seder actually does involve eating. So we'll have the appetizers.
And this is quite a dinner.
It's quite a dinner. Yes. It's more than a 7-course dinner. We go through the ritual of the Seder plate and the story of Passover, and there's a scheduled food fight in the middle of it.
Oh, what?
Yeah, that's an Afghani custom.
That I've missed. An actual food fight?
Well, it doesn't usually turn into that. Once in a while, a couple of people get a little rowdy with it, but it's part of an Afghan Seder. Actually, you can watch them on YouTube, and you'll see that they do become really interesting food fights, typically throwing scallions in small leeks, not large ones. And it's a way of livening the service at a point.
Throwing green onions. So
throwing green onions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I typically run around and hit people with a scallion, so. But then I'm a little bit wacko anyway. But I try to do that. I try to bring in different customs from different communities, because Jews are within all the different countries of the world, and different pockets of Jews have developed different customs, and even vastly different menus and recipes. So I offer some things out of the Sephardi community. The Afghan community, of course, is part of the Mizrahi community. So there are many different kinds of Jews, and they have different customs. It's fun to look at that and just really recognize that Jews all over the world are sitting down to recognize the idea of being free, and as free people being able to relate to God. And if things don't settle down in the Middle East really soon, it will be a very rough holiday, because it's always hard to celebrate a holiday when people are suffering as badly as people are right now. And I say that with a little bit of recognition that Israel is not the only place where there's over-the-top violence going on, that it's one of 9 hotspots on the planet right now. So our media, candidly, doesn't let us know enough about it. It's not of interest.
We see 2 or 3 of them, yeah.
Yeah, we hear a little bit about Ukraine, and we're hearing a little bit about Haiti, but there's
a little bit about Syria.
Yeah. So there's some different, but we don't hear the whole story. And I don't know if that's because people are afraid that it would become normalized to have that kind of violence and cruelty reported a lot. It certainly would be traumatizing. Speaking of trauma, that's another thing that we help people deal with. And it's just, there's a whole gamut of things. So, yeah. It is what it is. And we are on, we're at the, got about another close, not even a month left of the semester at IRSE, so finishing up those classes. Excuse me. And Kaiser is just finished the first week of the last term of the winter semester. So, and then we'll have our spring break, which is the first week of May. Looking forward to that.
Aha, yes.
Yeah. A couple of days without an alarm clock is very, very inviting.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's all good.
Do we
Yeah.
want to take a short break?
No, I don't think we will.
No,
I think we'll just,
okay.
we can talk again about the Seder. So if you want to be part of our Seder, I didn't give that part, right? I didn't do the ad part, which is that it is open to those who'd like to join us. The ritual meal is $36, and it is chicken, brisket, and salmon. And you don't have to pick one. It's buffet style, so you can have a little bit of all of them.
Sample it all, right?
Yeah, you can sample a little bit of it all, and there will be, so here's some of the other things. There'll be gefilte fish, matzo ball soup, chopped liver, of course matzah, and assorted salads, and assorted desserts. I mean, you're not going to go home hungry. And we even have some vegan options. So, but I need to know people who want a vegan option so that I make sure I have enough. And yeah, we service all of that. And
People make reservations for it.
they can make reservations. They can call the synagogue, and that is 772, and I'm forgetting the rest of the number, but I think it ends in 4110. Yeah, maybe go ahead and play that ad for the Seder.
Plan. Okay.
Yeah, there you
all
go.
right,
Play that ad
okay.
for the Seder.
Okay.
Are you looking for a Passover Seder this year, one that is both modern and has the traditional elements? A full ritual Seder at Congregation Eitz Chayim will be held for the community at 6 p.m. on Monday, the 22nd of April, April 22nd, 6 p.m., and we expect to be eating about an hour after that, a full ritual short Seder at Congregation Eitz Chayim. This is Rabbi Lobb inviting you. www.eitzchayim.org, eitzchayim.org. Hi, this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb inviting you to join us at Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. We are inclusive, we are welcoming, we are all things Jewish on the Treasure Coast. We have Kabbalat Shabbat services at Friday evenings at 7:30 p.m. Our sanctuary is at 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard at the corner of Irving in St. Andrews Community Center. Please join us there any Friday. On third Fridays, we have a Shabbat dinner at 6:15 p.m. Reservations can be made at our website, www.eitzchayim.org. You can stay up to date with us at our website or on Facebook. Lots of different ways to check in with Congregation Eitz Chayim. Again, a welcoming, inclusive Jewish home on the Treasure Coast, just for you to join us and enjoy your Jewishness. Renew your inner Jew at Congregation Eitz Chayim. So there you go. That's the ads for it, and you can check the website. You can also find us on Facebook if you look for Congregation Eitz Chayim. Eitz Chayim means tree of life, and that's the name that our congregation selected. And that's what we hope to and try to embody for people. But we do have a full ritual Seder. It will be at the Fellowship Hall, so around the corner within the same complex at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church on 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard. And that'll be starting at 6 p.m. on that Monday. And, take a few hours to go through everything, but a good, tasty meal, hopefully. People have enjoyed it, certainly, in the past.
A lengthy dinner, yes.
A lengthy dinner, lots of talking, and a chance to really get to know people, which is part, to me, of the fun of it, that you get to know folks.
Yes.
And that's $36 for the meal, which is really, today, not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. I'm not sure we'll be able to hold that price much longer, but this year, at least, we're still at 36. Yes. I know that a lot of congregations and communities have had to increase that. So we'll be looking for that, and there's all different kinds of vegetables, and the chicken, the brisket, and
now, who
the
does
salmon.
All the food preparation?
The members.
The members.
The members. So yeah, and we will do that, and come join us, be part of our community for the Seder, and anybody can join us. It's hopefully educational for everyone. I learn something every year in doing the Seder and in preparing for it. So if I can still continue to learn about Passover, I am hopeful that anybody else can as well. Yeah, it's an interesting festival. It's got actually 3 different names. So it's called Chag HaMatzot, the Festival of Matzah, which to have a holiday for matzah is kind of interesting. And I don't think that in ancient days it was quite the corrugated bread that we call matzah now. I think it was much more like a flat bread, like you'd see throughout the Middle East.
Unleavened, yeah.
Yeah, unleavened, quickly made. And that's the point of it, is that you quickly bake it, and it's frequently overbaked, but and that's to prevent it from getting any yeast. Of course, in the ancient days, as I like to tell people, they didn't have Fleischmann's instant yeast, so they had to leave the dough out to collect the yeast that grows in wheat or barley or oats or any of the grain formulas.
And
So
there
they
was
would leave it out.
Enough to have an effect on the flour?
Yeah, well, it does.
Yeah.
If you bake bread, you let it rise, and it's actually alive when you're doing that. When you bake it, you're killing the yeast that has caused the bubbles inside the bread, the rising, the leavening. And so matzah is baked before the yeast has a chance to cause the bread to become fluffy. So I think it's much more like if you would go and just get the flatbreads. In fact, the word pita is Arabic or Aramaic for bread. So yeah, the blessing for bread is Mare de Hai Pita, which is the same. So when you go to the store and you buy pita bread, you're buying bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Redundant, okay.
So Chag HaMatzot, the festival of unleavened bread, is one of the names. Another of the names is Chag HaPesach. The Pesach is the yearly lamb, the male lamb that's culled from the herd. And that's going to happen because very soon the animals are going to go into rut, and you don't want a whole bunch of little yearling males with a couple of females going into heat. And it's part of shepherding that since there have been shepherds, the average crop of young sheep and females and males is typically about 50-50, just as it is among humans. And how many male sheep does it take to service 50 females? 1 or 2, maybe 3. You don't need 50 of them, but you've got 50 little boys running around that are teenagers, and when the females go in heat, they get violent, and you're going to lose a bunch of them. So typically shepherds cull the herd. They will sell off, slaughter, etc. And if you're slaughtering a bunch of yearling male sheep, you're going to have a festival so that everybody eats it. So it's Chag HaPesach. That's the lamb from that. And the third name for the holiday is Zman Cherutzenu, the time of our freedom. And that celebrates coming out from being Pharaoh's slaves to having the freedom of responsibility and the responsibility of freedom, becoming our own people, not totally free, but free to serve God. So redeemed by God for God. And that's always a challenging invitation, if you will. But it comes with my favorite part, which is out of the book of Leviticus, is love your neighbor as you love yourself. So when Jesus says that, it's not that Jesus came up with it. Jesus was quoting from the book of Leviticus. It's got some rougher stuff in it, and it's definitely got some very beautiful stuff in it, like how to treat your neighbor so that you can get along with your neighbor. Mm-hmm. Would that we could do that today. Yeah, right?
We need to reread
we
that,
need
yes.
to, yeah, we really do need to look at that. So that gets to something about loving somebody. Love should never hurt. It's very simply put. It's not about manipulation. You don't test somebody to see if they love you. Love is something that is freely given. It's not given out of a sense of obedience or being demanded of you. It must be freely given. It is the emotion that requires free will. No other emotion needs that, which is kind of interesting. You can order somebody to be afraid, and they can muster that very quickly. You can order somebody to be angry, and people can generate anger, whether they're really angry at something or not. But you can't order somebody to love and bring that up spontaneously unless the person doing the loving wants to. And the best example of that is a newborn child is hopefully loved by its parents for no other reason than that it exists. It hasn't done anything to earn that love. But, the person who looks at that baby releases within themselves the hormones that give that love bonding sensation. So that's a free will. You've got to want to do that. And pretty important. So that's the idea that we have free will. So the ability to control some parts of our existence, because freedom is never 100%. I'm not free to do anything I want because there are other free human beings in the world and in my environment. And the freedoms bump into each other. Mm-hmm. So you have to recognize and respect that in love. So what is love about? It's not lust. That's a different emotion. Love is, I think, connected to the word lev, which is the Hebrew word for heart. And it means to put somebody in your heart and to want for everyone the best possible result. And sometimes that does mean letting go of somebody, letting them be who they need to be. It can mean a variety of things. And that doesn't mean that you can't have tough love, because sometimes that's what somebody really does need. So for example, if you have an alcoholic child, you really do need to run an intervention to try to help them get control over that mental illness, that addiction, and things like that. So sometimes we do need to be strong, and it's not just about giving people everything they want. That's not necessarily the best. In fact, it's not. Children definitely need boundaries. They need to know what limits are so that they can learn to manage their own emotions. We've learned over time that children who are given too much actually suffer much of the same damage as children who have nothing, which is kind of interesting. It has to do with learning boundaries, how to respect your own. And as I said before, just because you have freedom doesn't mean somebody else doesn't also. And so there's a boundary to yours where you get within a certain closeness to the other person. So you're not free to smoke in front of somebody else who might get secondhand smoke. You're not free to play your drums at extreme volumes next to a person who's going to physically or emotionally feel pain over that drumming. So we do have limits. And as I like to people come up to me and say, well, free speech. And I'm like, yeah, you're free to say something, but you're not free to not have the consequences of your speech. So, yes, I've got free speech. I can say just about anything I want. I've got a microphone in front of my face. I've got, Facebook. I've got TuneIn. I've got people all over the planet listening to this. And if I say something that is illegal or improper, there are consequences. I can't be stopped from saying it. You might click the lip and stop me. You're required to stop after a certain amount, but
Yes.
and I'm not going to say any of those words, but nor am I going to hopefully not do anything else that would cause the folks who control the broadcasting to have to react quickly. But that's the point of it. You can't just stand up and say something hurtful to somebody else and not face the consequences. There are consequences to life. There are boundaries of other individuals, other free creatures that needs to be respected. And I'm going to say that way. I'm going to say that animals have rights too. They have a right to not be tortured. They have a right to not be abused and not cruelly neglected. Those are all responsibilities that we as human beings take on, whether we want them or not. That's just part of who we are and what we are.
And there are people who draw a parallel to anyone who abuses an animal is
Oh, yeah, somebody who abuses an animal is likely to abuse another human being. And that gets to something else that I actually was planning on talking about as I was coming into the studio. And that is that very often when things get violent, I was thinking about the nature of the violence, and I was thinking about the civilians that get killed. And I was thinking of Abu Ghraib because I talked about that with people. When humans become cruel to others, and part of that has to do with the situation that when people, among other things, dehumanize other humans, refer to them as dogs or pigs or monkeys or anything that's less than human, there's a really high potential for violence because you no longer are recognizing the freedom and the dignity and the autonomy of that other human being. And as I said, I believe that autonomy extends to animals. That doesn't mean that I'm going to feed a mosquito voluntarily. I'm not. I will smack it quite.
There are some limits here.
There are some, yeah. Because if it's going to, mess with me, and I get that. And so the people often say, well, are you for Israel or against Israel? That's not the question. Certainly Israel has a right to defend itself. Certainly what Hamas did, there is no justification for coming in and burning children alive in their cribs. There just isn't. There's no justification for standing across the street and taking pot shots at people in their homes. That was over the top provocation. There is no excuse for rape ever. But at the same time, just because you have a right to defend yourself doesn't mean you can do anything you want to do. There needs to be appropriate, and candidly, the response needs to be something that in fact defends instead of takes revenge. And there needs to be a difference in that. And I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm willing to try to explore some of those. I don't think that any of the hotspots is taking the right approach, because otherwise they wouldn't be hotspots.
The founder of the World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres, wrote the lead opinion in the New York Times, I think it was Wednesday. And part of what he said was simply that Israel is better than the way this war is being fought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that there's a lot of protests in Israel right now over the people are not happy with the way the war is being run, and that's true on both sides. The average person in the street is not happy with what the leadership on either side is doing, and that's something to be aware of. And I often tell people that there's a couple of ways that sometimes your support for something is so great that no matter what they do is right. But if you really love what you're supporting, then you want what they do to be right. And that's always a challenge as human beings. How do I separate being right from doing right? Because I think that doing right is far more important than being right. Being right's an ego state, and it usually blocks you from the real answer, and it stops you from doing what you need to do and what others need to do. We need to respect all human beings as human beings. Every one of us has life because God gave us life. That's my theology. I admit that. I own that. That's my belief. God gave everybody life. Nothing else gave humans life. And whether, because that's my definition of God, by the way, is that force, that entity that gives life to beings on the planet. So who are we to try to rank that? We're all humans. God doesn't make junk. That's another of my big philosophies. God just doesn't make junk. So what makes people act as if they were junk? It's situations, lack of opportunity, a variety of things. And so when we go to destroy the enemy, the best way that I know to do that is to make them a friend. Right? You don't make peace with your friends, you already have it. You need to make peace with the folks with whom you don't have peace. And that takes recognizing that they are human beings with all of their foibles. We all have faults, we all have things that we do less than perfectly. None of us is a saint per se. Some of us might be a little better at some solutions in some situations than others, but none of us has the perfect answer for everything ever. And we can make the joke of the camel is the horse designed by a committee, but the camel is a very good animal for on the desert. And if you're looking for solutions for how to get across the desert and carry stuff, camel's a pretty good answer. So we need to look at things and look at solutions and how things can apply, how to make things work for the greatest good at the same time. So it's kind of a blend of Mills and Kant, if you will. We need to recognize people's autonomy. We can't just kill one person because we can take the 5 organs from them and save 5 other people. That's not okay. So it's not just it's not the greatest happiness. And it's certainly not the happiness of a small select group. It has to be what's for the greater good. And that's not an easy answer. I don't claim to know what that is. I'm willing to partake in the discussion to try to figure that out and to raise some of the questions that might challenge where we are and what we do. But I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm not here to say that. But I do recognize some of the problems. And part of them are when we fail to treat other human beings as God-given human beings. And yes, some people are poor, some people are uneducated, people are all different things. Let's fix what we can in the environment. Let's give people a reason to live, a reason to move forward, a sense of dignity and worth. Those are basic human needs, as are food, shelter, and basic medical. I think we need those things. We need to be able to recognize that people are people. And when Arafat shut down the terrorist organization, which was part of the deal way back when that peace deal was attempting to be made and before it fell through, what he did was he took the terrorists, married them off, gave them jobs, a home, something to live for, so that they no longer ran around destroying what others have. That I think is the key. We need to have enough minimum, and that doesn't mean that you don't it's not just a given thing. It's a give and take. So come, be educated, learn some skills, do something with it, become entrepreneurs, go into business, work for somebody, whatever that is, contribute back into society. Maybe have some requirement of community service as part of whatever you receive, so that people are giving and taking, because giving, interestingly enough, is one of the most important ways that you get the best bang of feeling significance for yourself when you give to others. That's not new. Religious leaders have said that since dirt, that when you give others, when you give and you're fair, you feel better. You don't have that rotten feeling inside that people who cheat others do have. And I'm not talking about conscience. There are people for whom empathy and conscience are not as effective as they perhaps could be. That's a mental illness if you don't have that. And so we need to do that. We need to be able to have compassion. We need to be able to have mercy. We need to have those positive sides for other human beings, because we are all human beings. It's not just all rich men are equal, which I'm sure was the understanding of that phrase when it was written, but we need to understand it in the way today, that it is all human beings are equal and should have access to those things that allow that human being to be a contributing, valuable member of society. If we don't give a child education, we can't expect them to be educated. If we don't give them medical, we can't expect them to be healthy. There is a responsibility on the community to give that to everybody. That's what a community is for. That's why we moved out of everybody hunter-gathering to living in cities, is so that we could take care of each other. There's an instruction in scriptures that comes in at Purim, and it comes in again right at Passover, which is to remember to blot out the memory of Amalek. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Remember to blot out the memory. Amalek is, and that's plays into the Purim story. That's why it's in Purim. But the Amalekites were known for taking advantage of the stragglers, those that were isolated, that were marginalized in the population. And it's not about destroying Amalek, it's about not having marginalized people, so there's nobody for the Amaleks of the world to attack. So you don't leave stragglers, you keep everybody in the community safe. And I'll go so far as to say that was one of the problems in Israel that allowed for the October 7th attack. It should not have taken the army as long as it did to respond. People should not have been able to run around with impunity as long as they did, wreaking havoc. So that's a failure on Israel's side to defend its people from what essentially, Hamas is a gang. It's really not any different from Haiti. They really are gangs who are just power hungry and unfortunately raising a group of pawns, cannon fodder, if you will. They're people that don't have anything to live for, don't see anything good in the world, and that's the other part that came up in Abu Ghraib. If you don't give people specific instructions, if you don't limit them and hold them accountable, people can do really horrible things to other human beings because they think it's okay in the scenario. And that's an improper upbringing, if you will, of the individual, that we raise people who don't think that there are limits on what you do to other human beings. And I think we can do better as a species. I think we can look at our estranged peoples in all communities. If you give minimum needs to people, they will no longer have a need to take it from somebody else. And do that with the proviso that yes, they have to do something. Make it community service. Find a way to make that work. I think that can be done. I'm not asking somebody to do something they can't do, but let's give everybody that sense of I'm contributing to society, because that's an important part of self-respect, that you're not just taking, but that you are in fact also expected to give, that you're being held accountable. There's a value for human beings to recognize that they need to do that. And money is just the token, if you will, that changes hands, that represents power. It represents, so when I go and buy an article of clothing for, I don't know, let's take round numbers, $50, then I have to recognize that I'm using X number of hours of my effort to buy that garment. So I'm trading, if you will, my labor for that garment that I didn't make. And that's how society works. We all produce different things, services, goods, etc., and they are exchanged for money, which is then exchanged for goods and services. So the money is just the token in between. And that needs to be shared at a way that keeps people safe and productive. That people need to have that sense of, I'm worth something, I mean something to somebody, I give something of value to the society. We forget that. And when we talk about a welfare state, we forget that piece of it. I'm not saying that everybody needs to go do a 9 to 11 job, but I am saying that people need to recognize that they can be expected to do something. I don't know what that is, but I know that there are people who can help figure that out for individuals. That might be career planners or vocational advisors. There's all kinds of people that can learn how to help others and manage that. How do you give back into the community, into the society, so that you recognize it's not a handout, but it's a fair trade, something from you for something for you, but in a way that does give basic human needs to human beings. We need to do that. We need to start treating ourselves and each other like human beings. And so I'll end with that. That is, love your neighbor as you love yourself, because that's what's best for all. And God willing, it'll lead to peace. Zman Cherutzenu, a time of freedom for all. Please God, let's make that so. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, and this has been Ask a Rabbi. So please do check us out, www.eitzchayim, and hopefully I'll talk to you next week.
This is WPSL, Port St. Lucie.